Say it's just up there. It's right on Gantown Road. Wait, are you doing the check?
This meeting is now back in order. Mr. Bilodeau, do you
What's the
have
number?
anything, any corrections you'd like to make?
I do, Mrs. Johnson. Good evening, members of the Board of Education. Good evening, members of the public. Good evening. I do have a few items from this evening's agenda that do need to be changed. They are all in the form of being withdrawn from the agenda. So the first items that I want to withdraw are items 4.1 and 4.2. They are related to minutes. There are brief edits that need to be done. The individual responsible for them had a scheduled day off. So rather than try to read these edits in to the existing minutes, I think it'd be more prudent to allow the interim business official to correct them, and we will bring them back to the board for consideration in the month of February. The second item under payments to the Board of Education, I'd like to withdraw 2 checks from this evening's bill list. Those checks are numbered 128529. Again, 128529 being withdrawn, and check 128305 being withdrawn from this evening's bill payment list.
Mr. Bilodeau, can you tell us who they're both for?
The first check is for Panoni, is the district's engineer. They had an errant invoice that needs to be corrected before the check goes out. Thank you, Mrs. O'Donnell.
And the second?
The
I knew
second,
the first one. I really just wanted the second one. Sorry.
This is the second one.
the second one is for an employee. It was a reimbursement. It was processed. It should not have been processed because the person had been in one union, gravitated to another union, and the ability to be reimbursed for something prevailed when they were in the first union, but they're in a second union, and that reimbursement doesn't apply pursuant to that contract. So before the check went out, we withdrawn it, and we have had the supervisor in that department explain that to the staff member.
Thank you.
Any questions thus far? The third item is 7.4D. It is related to the threshold. That item is being withdrawn from the agenda. And that is I have Mrs. Johnson.
Okay, thank you.
Don, excuse me, can you just explain why that's being withdrawn to the public?
Sure, I'll do my best. When any public entity buys goods and services, there are bid thresholds. It is set pursuant to state statute. The district our size, it is $32,000 by default, but it can go up to $44,000 if you have a qualified purchasing agent. We recently hired an assistant business administrator who possesses the qualified purchasing agent license, and I intended just to give the board more buying power from 32 to 44. But we talked about that, and we're going to wait until we have the entire business office with all of its administrators and staff before we revisit this. I don't think it harms the district. And by illustration, if you wanted to buy something for $35,000, there are a number of ways you can do it still legally. You can bring those things to the Board of Education if it was like a state contract. But if you were to build specs to build a shed, a really nice shed, and it was going to be $40,000, yes, like at Glen Landing, for example. If it's in excess of 32,000, then under public contract law, the Board of Education would need to put that in the paper, advertise it, and let vendors respond to the bid. We would take the low apparent bid who can meet the bid specs technically. I know that's probably more than you wanted, Mrs. Gilch.
No,
but
I just wanted the public to kind of get an idea why we withdrew it.
Yeah, I think it was because we want a full complement of staff before we revisit it.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Yes.
All right, at this time, we're going to go to 4.3. Are there any comments from the public on agenda items only?
Oh, go ahead.
Good, Chip. That's all. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Chip.
3 quick questions. I just need clarification. On 7.4, but I know you would do one. Are any of those items extra funds or are they all going to be taxed?
All of those items, save 7.4D, which has been withdrawn, are going to be out of current expense. They are not out of a grant for ESSER.
Are we done with our ESSER fund? Did
We are not.
All that money?
We are not.
So
We're-
we
we're-
could use
we're-
any of that to this? for this?
We're through the CARES money and we are through ESSER 1, but we do have other grants under ESSER 2 and 3 that we still have to we are spending and we're hopefully going to spend through them all by the time that the date lapses.
We're not going to lose ESSER fund.
We don't have an intent to lose ESSER funds, no.
Okay. So these will be taxes, paid by the taxes?
These would be out of the general fund. Yes, it wouldn't be a special revenue, which is what you're referring to as a grant.
Right.
Out of the regular budget
Right.
in common terms.
Additional cost, you're saying?
No,
Yeah, well, what you pre-budgeted.
yeah, what we had budgeted a year ago
Right.
in the current expense budget, these are items from that.
And it will fall within our set.
Yes,
Right, that's question 1. Question 2, I think Mr. Long might have to answer that.
Uh-oh.
This one for you.
Is it? No.
Under executive session, when you go into closed session.
Yes.
Do, my plans say 4, but I heard you had 9 tonight.
Yes.
All right, so I asked him for a friend.
Yep.
If you're talking about somebody in executive session.
Yes.
Do they have to get a rice
They
letter?
have to, if it's an employee, they have to get a rice letter. Yes.
Because somebody's under the impression they were being talked about tonight and didn't get a rice letter.
Okay.
So like when do you get it? When do you not get it?
When your terms and conditions of your employment are discussed in executive session,
Okay.
you are by law required to receive a rice notice. And what that means is that gives you notification that the conversation is taking place. And it gives you the option to make it public. Well, just for the public as a whole. I don't need, you're the last person who did.
Say, how do I find out?
Well, we can't discuss who it is, but here's what I could say. If their terms and conditions of employment were discussed in executive session at any time, not necessarily tonight, that person needs a rice
My
notice.
question is, if there's only been 4 posted in the agenda and you changed it to 9.
Right.
Did those 5 other people get?
Great question. So
That's
it's, so it remained, there were 4 personnel listed on the agenda. It stayed at 4 personnel. The 9 became 3 matters, which were student matters and under exception 1. And then 2 were exception 7 legal matters. So those were matters that don't involve personnel. Those were,
Oh, so they weren't falling under.
they
category
weren't
8.
under category 8. Category 8 is what prompts the rice notice. The rest of the categories do not.
So 9 matters, but not all have been under 8.
4 of them, 4 of the 9 were under 8. The other 5 were under the other ones.
Thank you for that clarification.
You are welcome, Mr. Pilbus.
See, I mean, now, what?
John, where is this?
Have fun too. 6.6E, the last thing, excellence in teaching, which I'm all for the excellence in teaching. But are we saying that our tax dollars of 1,280 are going to send a teacher from Our Lady of Hope to a college?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, that's not excellence in teaching.
Well, before I answer that question, I just want to let you know, Mr. Pildes, that you weren't discussed in executive tonight.
I was. Thank you.
All right.
No, I really was asking for a friend.
Oh. The answer to your question is, I don't know what your definition of tax dollars are, but the federal government has money that is bestowed to not only public school districts, but to non-public school districts. And in this particular case, it is federal money, not local or state tax dollars that are funding that event, because it is out of state. And because of the amount of money, we had it.
It's even out of state.
It is.
We can't even take a conference like that working here.
Well, technically you can, but you would need board approval and county office approval. So an administrator from this district, knowing that is unusual, did contact the Department of Education, state of New Jersey, on how to properly approve the professional development for a non-public staff member. And they said you must do it in similar terms the way you do it. So we normally approve professional development on that item for just our staff. But because this is a very, very special thing, we're following house rules for a non-public staff member. And it is money that was quorumed or designated for that non-public school, not our funds.
It's not our funds.
So say a member of GTEA who has to pay for their own workshops goes to this federally funded pocketbook, we could get this too?
Through the right channel.
I think if someone had desired to go that route and a supervisor or all the way up through, say, Mr. Tro or Dr. Martin thought it was beneficial, the answer would be technically, you can always put something in front of the Board of Education for approval, which tonight is in front of the board for
But is
approval.
it for the dates off, or is it for the actual cost of the workshop?
The money that's there is for the workshop itself. That is listed there. It's not for time. We're not paying the
But it's
person
coming
to
out
be
of
there.
federal funds.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I just needed that clarification, and congratulations to the two new board members. I didn't get to being officially congratulated. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And just as a reminder to the public, you do have 3 minutes. Anytime that you're up. Thank you, Mr. Gillis.
Your policy committee.
I think this gentleman did have his hand up.
Yeah, I just want a couple of quick questions. One thing,
If we get your,
Sir, give your name and address, please.
sorry, Darren Thomas, 501 Cecilia Drive.
Thank you.
So there's, indication of a couple of reports, I just want my education, what is the HIV stand?
harassment, intimidation, and bullying.
Okay. Yeah. And then the second question I had is regarding, back in November, there was a lot of discussion about the issues with the transportation department. I wasn't able to attend December's meeting. Okay, well, I wanted to find out if there been any progress. I understand from Ms. O'Donnell that there was discussion between the board and the Gloucester Township Professional Associates. And I want to find out what the result of those conversations were, if that's able to be discussed. And then I spoke with the transportation director, Lynn Tyone, and she's done a great job on her team with like helping her my kid the bus route, but I am curious what the status is of everybody else's kids.
So. We answer that.
Do you want to just do this
But
if I
this
do
is
something
not a-
there?
Go for
But
it.
it's
Yeah,
not
go
a-
for it.
So,
It's not on your agenda item. Okay.
I'm okay with it,
Okay.
honestly.
Okay.
It's follow-up, so it's fine. So we are trying to still get that meeting to happen through Mr. Long's office. Unfortunately, it has not been scheduled yet. So the board is available.
What does that mean, the board is available?
That's exactly
The
what
board
it
is
says.
available to me. Mr. Long has sent all the information that he needed to send. And
We're willing to, that's
we're
all,
willing to meet. We're waiting.
that's all we can say publicly.
We're waiting for the bus. You have to give us a little more clarification.
We have to go through certain steps
Right.
to be able to facilitate a meeting.
Okay.
There's certain protocols that we have to go through. So the first step is we have to go through Mr. Long's office, who then took the steps.
To the superintendent.
To the superintendent, who then took the steps to try to facilitate this meeting. From what I'm hearing, it has not been,
And that's-
nothing has happened yet.
Wait, it's not. you gotta- This is where. it's not-
Read something that was sent to you.
Yeah, gavel. So, all right, so everybody at this point, so, yeah, so one, it's Jared's time. Two, the first was about agenda items that kind of veered off and now we're off the agenda portion of it. So do you have anything else that's agenda? The word transportation is on the agenda, but not any labor negotiation. So we can address that in the second public portion.
Second public portion. Yes.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak
We gotta see if anybody else wants to on agenda.
on agenda items? Anyone? Seeing none? Oh,
No.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right, Chip notice again. On page 2 of 6.4, I missed it with my notes. Question. I'm trying to rationalize the student ID number in the box for Winslow. That's transportation for both boxes for the same exact child. Why is there 4 different bills for transportation for one child? Like, they're not even 2 different students, they're the same student.
Would that be a typo? For the
No,
student
I
ID?
don't, and we may not be able to discuss that publicly either.
That was sent up from the purchasing department.
All
I
right,
put it on as is.
so I don't think you can answer that. Yeah,
We'll
Alright.
look into it.
When you say typo, do you think it's?
I know, we don't think
We
we
don't
don't think
know.
it's a typo. It was according to Mr. Bilodeau, sent up from purchasing. He put it on there. And that's where we are, but we can't, it's a homeless student. So they have a privacy protection, so we can, it's certainly possible. It's certainly possible because it's tuition and transportation. So of a homeless student, it could be for multiple years, it could be a semester, we're not sure.
Where's tuition? This is all.
So it's tuition. So it's 6.4B, homeless student tuition. So if you look Winslow Township School District and then transportation. Winslow Township School District, there's 2 separate items.
Oh,
One's tuition and one's transportation, correct?
But they both say transportation.
No, it's just, it's Winslow Township School District. Done, transportation, rather than Winslow Township School District transportation.
But it's the same kid.
It is the same kid. That's certainly possible, Mr. Pildes, to have that happen. For a homeless, because so under the McKinney-Vento, which is a federal law. You are required when a student meets the definition of homeless for educational stability. If they are living here and declared homeless, go to the last school where they had a permanent residency and we have to transport them. I'm not sure what the time frame is of that, but I have seen it. It could be it could be when it gets billed from that other school district, but Mr. Bilodeau can look into it.
I see how.
Makes sense. Yeah, I don't know what for sure, but it's possible.
There might have been somebody.
Anyone else want to speak on agenda items only?
Yes, on anything. Yes.
All right, seeing none, we're going to go to 5.0, report of the solicitor, Mr. Long.
My items were discussed in the executive session, Mrs. Johnson, to thank you.
Thank you. To 6.0, report of the superintendent, Mr. Bilodeau.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson, members of the board, members of the public again. Tonight, under discussion items, I'd like to call back our Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, Mr. Tro, to give a brief presentation on how student performed all 2022 assessment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Milito. And just a couple of months ago, I think it was in November, I made a presentation on last spring. New Jersey State learning assessments and the results that we had on those. One of the things that we had put in as a measure that during the pandemic, that we had required testing through Start Strong to fulfill our federal testing requirements. The NJSLA was not given for 2 years. And so when that was completed, we thought that the requirement was going to fade. It did not. So in addition to testing in the spring, which was the testing that was publicly reported, that is used for federal accountability regulations. We gave this again in the fall, the Start Strong assessment to all students that you'll see in this below in grades 4 through 8. Similarly to the other assessment, we are required by law to share those results publicly and with the board. So I will move as quickly as I can. So you want me to slow down at any point and back up, but I will explain a little bit what I'm doing and move through it relatively quickly. I know we've had a lot of presentations. So to start from the second, I did explain some of that. It's grades 4 through 8 take it in our district. And the reason it's 4 through 8 instead of 3 through 8 is because they're being tested on the previous year's scores. Or previous years, I'm sorry, not scores, but the previous year's standard. So 4th graders being tested with 3rd grade skill at the beginning of 4th grade to see if they mastered where they are with the previous year's skills. So they're not intended to replace and anything that the district does, and they're not intended to replace the NJSLA. And it's a shortened test intended to give immediate results. The teachers can see the results as soon as the student clicks submit. And so that is one of the positives of the test. There's also very few test items. And because of that, it's not very generalizable. And you're not able to draw very sweeping conclusions about specifically individual student results, which therefore is the slide that says required, but with a warning. It's required. We have to publicly report the results and tell you that you really shouldn't use the results for anything. So it's kind of one of those interesting things that we do. So that please note our strong assessments are not designed to predict future student performance on NJSLA, nor were they designed to estimate what score a student would have received if they had taken the NJSLA in the spring of 2022 or prospectively to 2023. They were designed specifically to inform instruction going forward. So the whole intent is for teachers to look at the results, try to get some sort of feeling for where their students are right there at that time, and then use that information to make instructional decisions going forward, and to possibly generate some conversations with parents. That is the sole purpose of the assessment, but we are still reporting them publicly. So again, can't do a whole lot of analyzing of the data based on the warnings that were given. And a lot of those things that we typically do with NJSLA of comparing ourselves, to other districts and so forth. They're saying, please don't use these for comparison purposes. There's 5 NJSLA performance levels. One of the things that makes it difficult to compare is there's only 3 for the Start Strong. So you're not comparing apples to apples, even in the score. Everything has that that I've added of May. So it might say support not needed. I'm sorry, no, level 1 strong needed. Some support may be needed as level 2. Level 3 is less support may be needed. There's not a whole lot of guidance for exactly what that means. There's a lot of names. So when you look at some of the scoring across there for all students with ELA, you can see generally speaking, you'll see, especially in ELA, roughly speaking in thirds, third of the kids falling into each of the categories. And you can see there's some variation between buildings. Some of that variation is a little bit bigger when you get to individual grade levels where you got smaller numbers of students, greater likelihood of having more variation. Grade 5, grade 6, grade 7, and grade 8. So you can see a lot of similarities there. You got about 40% of the kids in the less support needed, and then you got about 20, 25 in that middle band, and then you got those other the additional 30 to 35 to 40% of students. When you look at subgroups, one of the other things we report out, again, you see probably some similar numbers here to what you would see in NJSLA as far as having some discrepancies between traditional groups of students that have struggled in schools and things that we're working to do, particularly when you look at students of color, economically disadvantaged students, and students with disabilities. Sorry. Math, again, very similar, but you've got smaller numbers of students in that top group, which again isn't surprising considering statewide passing scores usually in math tend to be a little bit low when you're talking NJSLA, even though we're not making that comparison. We know that the students typically have had a little bit more trouble with the state testing as it relates to math. And so again, you can see that while there's smaller groups in that top achievement level, some variation across the district, you're still looking at around 20% of students that are in that top band, and about 40 to 50% of students overall. 6th grade scores, 7th grade, 8th grade. Some of those numbers get smaller, probably in 8th grade, you get to algebra. And this is where it kind of shows you to maybe not take it. This is probably the classic example of taking some of this with a grain of salt. It shows only about 47% of our algebra students in that top band. You know that typically around 90% of our algebra students or more. Before the pandemic, it was 96% of algebra students passed. And I think even last year in the pandemic, it was over 90%. So you can see that these results are somewhat cautious as it relates to how people perform. And again, some of the comparison, you see some of those individual things here, particularly economic disadvantaged students and students of color having some disparities in results. We move to science, again, looks somewhat similar to math. With the science results, and we know that that was an area we already knew from the display that was an area of need, an area where students struggle to be able to perform at the level expected by the state. So they're report there that our teachers are giving to them. Key reports, again, from the distance, can be difficult to see, but these are some of the reports that teachers during in-service days and on their own and on PLC days can look at individual standards here that are listed, and then they can also see individual questions. So they have an idea of what students struggled with, and that can be helpful sometimes for the students, but especially when you start looking at large groups of students, you can start to identify those on specific standards and try to say which students in those areas where they can explore. Action plan, I basically just repurposed the action. It's the same action plan we had and I presented back in November with some of the new curricular programs. You saw some of those here tonight and other activities that we're doing with teachers have been given opportunity back on in-service days as well as professional learning communities. There are the regular meetings that they have to look at some of this data and make decisions about that. And we will be giving them some more time during early dismissal day in February to work further on. And that's all I have. Any questions from the board? Like I said, I went very quickly through it. If you want to drill down and ask any more deep questions, please do. But I do think that the presentation in November is more pertinent, and we had a real nice conversation there. This was largely just checking off the box that we did report on these things publicly.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Sure, I do have one question. Is the state going to continue this?
I have no idea. I have not heard.
I thought this was
Recently,
like a
I know that
bridge
this was
over.
one of the few areas of, one of those areas of agreement where there was a joint letter last year from the Superintendent's Association, the Principals and Supervisors Association, and the NJA, all saying, why are we giving this again? Please don't. We still have to give it again. We'll see whether there's any change to that.
I think you read through my question. Thank you, Mr. Trout.
Superintendent said,
Oh,
just the balance. Yeah, just.
Yeah. yeah, Mr. Bilodeau, can we have the report of the superintendent,
The
please?
balance, yeah, it's under 6 points. Good. Ask the board for a consent resolution, please, as amended. I think no, I don't think I touched anything in 6.6. So let's just do 6.2A through 6.6.
L.
L. 6.2A through 6.6L. Consent resolution, please.
Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
I do. 6.6E. The professional development. We're sending four teachers to building the skill of competence levels of struggling math students. Is there a reason why we're sending four?
They're all from the same school.
Well, I noticed this is about Mrs. Vasco's on here, who is
Double
the
up.
supervisor. Do we know if this is a good program? That's probably one of my biggest questions.
I don't know the answer to that. But I would imagine if Dr. Tabasco's going, I would, tend to think it would have merit.
That's what I'm wondering why we're sending all these teachers though.
I don't know the quantity. They don't always come in one batch per se, when I'm approving them.
I know this is gonna be a pain, but is there any way, I always ask professional development questions, always.
Yes, you
It's
have.
just from day one when I was on the board.
Yes.
Is there any way that I can get a little synopsis of what these are? So that I maybe don't ask so many questions?
We used to get the paperwork.
I'm nodding, yes.
Only because I'm sure people out there know, I'm big on asking questions on why we're sending teachers, what the program is about. So maybe if I get something that can explain to me what it's about, maybe I won't ask as many questions,
We used to
if
get.
that's possible.
On all events or when there's.
And there's PD.
Yes.
Mr. Tro.
Faces at you.
I know you're probably gonna,
I wasn't looking at Mr. Tro.
So.
He was looking at you.
There's our math supervisor and there's another teacher from each of the three middle schools. So the intent of what they're trying to do, obviously, we saw from some of the scores that were here tonight and back in November that we have a lot of students who are struggling in math. They're trying to improve what we're able to do in the middle school to support students. In mathematics, we have a full block of time. We're trying to make sure we maximize the use of that time. So the intent of this training is for these teachers to go along with a math supervisor, receive the training, then meet a representative at each one of the middle schools to be able to support the other teachers in the middle schools with implementing some of these strategies that might help our students experience more success in the math classroom.
okay. So I don't know if you heard, is there any way on this PD that I can get if you can email to me of what is the PD and what it's for, like, because I always ask these questions.
Talk to Mr. Bill, we can talk and,
We used
when
to.
people fill it out, they have to submit a rationale with it.
Right.
We approve it.
And I think we
So,
used to get that, but
We used to
Alright.
get the
We-
paper that they filled out and it would be
Yeah.
attached to it.
I mean, I feel like I'm redundant all the time asking the same question, but I just want to know what exactly it is and what we're going for. So,
I'd like to see that information.
Oh, yeah.
I want them to just send it.
thank you.
Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dantino,
Yes.
Mrs. Fitz,
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilch,
Yes.
Mrs. Ford,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Mrs. Reese,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell,
Yes.
and Mrs. Johnson.
Yes. Can we have a report of the business administrator, Mrs. Grubb, please?
I'm asking for a consent vote on items 7.1 through 7.7 as amended, which would include the two checks we discussed earlier and not 7.4D.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Questions?
Oh, any questions on these?
To check.
I do, please.
Okay,
I don't have a question, but I would like to move to table check number 128-524.
1, 2, 3, 5, 2, 4.
Yes,
I'll second that.
Table.
yes, please.
all in favor?
Wait, I gotta
Wait a minute, I
find-
gotta find the check.
What number?
Or you can say, who it is.
It's Parker McKay.
All in favor?
Some of the invoices need to be reviewed.
Aye.
For more information?
Yes. Can you-
Yes,
Okay.
Yes,
I can. For more information, that's correct. For some clarifying stuff.
You good?
Yes, aye,
All right,
Aye,
yep,
aye, aye.
five,
Aye.
it's tabled.
Okay.
okay. Roll call, please.
Can I?
Any other?
Oh,
My question.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
On page 1 of the bill list, there's 2 checks for $9,500 each, for Bowman. There are different account numbers. Does that mean that 9,500, it's a different department?
Does.
You know what
It's
I
the
mean?
enterprise
Okay,
funds.
thank you. And then on page 15, there is a sub-teacher ESS, discount of $3,000 that's included in the, billing. Is that I believe we got a memo on this. Is that the money that was owed that Mrs. Dentino's been chasing down for several years?
It is exactly the money
So
that
she-
Mrs. Dentino
Thank
was
you.
correct on. And
Okay.
we have been holding that check for a
That's
long
what I
time
thought.
and we never released it.
Okay,
So it is now a reduced check and if approved, it'll go out.
well, thank
Very,
you.
very good. Dentino.
No more questions.
Anyone else with questions?
Thanks, Mrs. Reese.
Okay, in that case, roll call, please, Mrs. Grubb?
Mrs. Dentino.
I'm gonna abstain from 7.3 because I didn't have a bill list to review ahead of time. And then yes on the balance.
Mrs. Fritz,
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilt,
I'm voting no on check 128-348, yes on
1,
the
2,
balance.
8,
348.
128-348, yes on the balance.
Mrs. Gore,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
I'm gonna abstain on 7.3, yes on the balance.
Mrs. Reese,
I'd like to vote no on check number 128-348, please, and yes on the balance.
okay. Mrs. O'Donnell,
Yeah.
Even if I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am going to abstain on check 128-554.
1, 2, 8, okay.
I'm a no on 128-348.
Okay,
And that one was pulled, yes on the balance,
okay.
sorry.
Mrs. Johnson,
A no on 128-348.
1, 2, 8, 3, 4.
Abstain on 128-356 and 128-463. Yes on the balance.
And the second one you read is also abstain.
Yes,
And the number again,
128-463.
thank you.
At this point, Mr. Bilodeau, any old business?
Not at this time, no, right.
Any new business?
Not at this time.
Can I do something for old business?
What?
It was brought up last week, or last meeting. Mrs. Hendry requested that the bill list be uploaded with the agenda. All right, I'll save it.
The board member.
Now I get to say it twice.
Okay, anything else at this point? No. Seeing that, we're at 10.0, public comments. Are there any comments from the public on any topic? Yes, your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Ashley. I've been five. I have a 12-year-old daughter here at Mullen. I thank everyone for being here, especially the moms that I've met over the years that are here tonight. Due to an incident that happened with my daughter. A little over a month ago, my daughter, who is a straight A student, she is a quiet, well-mannered girl, was attacked in the lunchroom from behind. She was grabbed by the hair, her face was smashed into the lunch table, and she was repeatedly punched in the face. I'm appalled that this happened. My daughter has never experienced this, nor even seen this kind of violence. Yet within the first few months at Mullen, this is what happened. Yes, the girl was suspended, and yes, the girl had the police called on her. Yet the girl still has not learned her lesson, and my daughter still tells me to this day about things this girl does to her. This has prompted me to reach out to other moms who have told me about similar fights that their children have seen. Many have mentioned to me that their kids do not feel safe at home, and my daughter has mentioned this as well. We came here tonight to hopefully be able to brainstorm together and start changing the school and the kids so that we can make the school better. It is clear that violence is an issue because I hear similar instances have happened at other schools. I can say though, that having kids go through Union Valley, this does not happen at this school. I do not know what the difference is here, but I am hoping that maybe there is some insight as to what is different here, and it can maybe be applied to Mullen. Any kind of insight at this point would be helpful to hopefully spark change, because I'm here tonight as a desperate mother who just wants their child to feel safe. Thank you.
I am so sorry that this is happening. Right now, we cannot discuss publicly what is being done and how we're going to work with the schools and as far as discipline, anything along that line, but we will get back to you as soon as we're able to speak it to you.
I apologize, but she's trying, another kid. So if it comes to that point, I will, but I'm still trying to hope that he can come from the school where I have to press charges. I mean, she's still only another 12-year-old girl. I think my daughter did that. A lot more would have happened to her than what I've seen put on this girl from the family and this woman. But yeah.
I'm sorry, can you repeat when this took place?
What's that?
When did this take place?
I don't remember the exact date because a lot of instances honestly have told me that was the most severe, but last month. I can get you the exact date though.
I don't know, because we didn't know about it. Yeah. Right before Christmas?
Yeah, it was.
So they would get-
Don't even ask.
I mean, a lot of life. I'm not sure. Luckily, the boss didn't.
Okay, we will certainly take a look into this. Yes,
Before Christmas.
your, can you,
Security.
your name and address, please?
With this instance, I guess I can use that as the example, like with the security with the kids and stuff, we were told that with that instance, there was only one teacher at the post, and I know you can't have teachers everywhere, and when we spoke with the principal, she said it was just bad timing, I definitely said, was that just bad timing? Teachers originally to post, but I feel like the kids are taking advantage of that, so I thought that we had a resource officer, but I was under the impression he's not here all the time.
That's correct.
So.
We have a resource officer we have 3 resource officers that float throughout the school.
Like the, cafeteria, I know you can't prevent everything.
Right.
All the time, but when, particularly this school had one teacher in the cafeteria, and, the child took advantage of that. The cafeteria is definitely.
Yeah. So, hang on. Hey guys, can we just have just one person at a time? So,
Mr. Villager, do you know what the procedure would be for one person in the cafeteria?
Or can we just take a look at that?
Can we look at that? Can we?
certainly have to, we have to.
Wait, not yet.
Let me, 1 second, Patty.
Let me get it, Pat.
A building this size and the size of the lunches that happen. Clearly, one adult is not adequate. That is, if that happened, then something is materially wrong and has to be cured. I don't know, Patty, if you have anything to add, but I will look into.
Okay, thank you.
Evening, my name is Patty Fryer, I'm the president of the Teachers Association, GPA, and I can guarantee you there was probably 4 teachers in the cafeteria at that time and 1 administrator. Okay, there might have only been 1 teacher near that table, but we have, I don't know if everything, there's lots of tables in there and you float around that cafeteria. And within seconds, because literally, and it might not seem like seconds to your daughter, I apologize for that, but within seconds, somebody was right there. I mean, it was, it was not really.
All right, well, let's not talk about the specific instance. I'm talking about, here's what we should do. Number 1, we should look into the concerns that the first brought up on adequate supervision and what's, well, 1, dealing with the specific incident. I think I see a small picture question and a bigger picture question. And I don't mean it meaning small picture, meaning 1 incident. And the bigger picture question is security as a whole. I think and that's something we always look at. And I think we should continue to review and look at.
Absolutely.
Got one on the right.
Yes.
My question is, what exactly is the responsibility of the SRO? Are they allowed to actually do the billing involved?
Yes.
Are they allowed to do that too?
They are active duty police officers.
They can.
Yes.
Can it also?
Yes.
They can't handle students in Gloucester Township.
No, they're regular.
It's regular police officers like anything else. Now, there's different rules with juveniles, of course, as opposed to adults, but is there that type of prohibition? No.
Anyone else have a question? Yes, sir.
Yes, good evening.
Your name, please.
David Kavanaugh, 824 Wingate.
Thank
I'm here tonight to bring to your attention an incident that took place around January 1st with my son. And I'm humbly requesting you. On that day, my son was seen entering a bathroom between classes. Under current policy, this is not allowed. And I'd like to understand why and how we can make it better. He was followed into the bathroom by a teacher who determined that the circumstances were suspicious and they wanted to investigate further. My son was sent to see the vice principal. After several requests by my son and refusing to speak until I was on the phone, I was finally contacted. The situation was explained to me and I agreed reluctantly to a search being performed on my 11-year-old. Nothing was found. Despite nothing being found, my son was still punished with detention for the simple act of entering a bathroom, because bathrooms are unauthorized areas in between classes according to school policy. The reason I was told they are unauthorized is because the administration is unable to police them during that time. I've since been informed that bathrooms pose a safety risk of not knowing where a student is. I can't reach that conclusion. And the list of unauthorized areas is not documented. I don't feel a bathroom in a government facility in a generally accessible area should ever be off limits to my son or any child. I actually prefer that my child use the bathroom in between classes and not during scheduled class time. I think that's a responsible decision on his part. I also believe making bathrooms off limits is a violation of building code, though I don't claim to be an expert in that area. I'm petitioning the board to correct this policy with the greatest urgency. If the issue is an inability to police the bathrooms, I can understand that, but we need to figure out how. Let's discuss what would be required to make them safe and available at all times. I also ask that the school does not subject my child or any other child in this district to scrutiny or punishment solely because they entered the bathroom. Please make bathrooms available at all times with no cloud of suspicion and no punishment unless there are further indications of misconduct. Thank you.
Actually, we do have policy and we will certainly look into it.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey, we gotta see if everybody else goes.
Anyone else have any questions? Yeah. Your name, please?
Do you mind stepping forward a little bit because it's tough for this side of the room to see you on the pole? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I understand it. Every child deserves a safe environment. It's not, it's not something that we want to see or hear, or every time a child has something happening like this, and it affects everyone. Every child that was in that cafeteria, I'm sure affected every single one because they all saw it. They all want to know what's going on. And I'm sure it was all through the school by the time the end of the day. So, but we are working on it. We intend to check our policies and make sure that they are followed.
That's right. Sure. So here's my suggestion in terms of a timeline. So the board only meets once a month together as a group. When we have to only meet, I'm getting there. So my suggestion is that anybody that the three of you, if you're interested in the information, leave your name and address and contact information with the business administrator. And then the appropriate administrator, when there's something to report, can get in touch with you that way. And that can be done in between meetings, of course, rather than having to do like a month to month to month sort of thing. Because that's the disadvantage that we have in a public meeting, but the school district operates even every single day.
Right, like if you knew this from the beginning, why hasn't everybody done it?
The board did not, and this is why we have our meetings in public, and that is why we have public comment. And that's why we appreciate you coming to the board meeting so that the.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we need to hear from you because we're not in the buildings all day. So we appreciate anything you bring to us. Thank you.
Mr. Wilson.
You have somebody in the very back.
I was just following up on my previous comment from the beginning of the meeting about the HIV. So I was looking at the HIV report, week 7/15 and January 17th. There's 10 investigations throughout the entire school district. And Mullen's got 2 investigations and then 0 affirmations by the BOE. Can you just clarify what is required?
Sure. So, yeah, this is a good one. How many times have you and I talked about this over the last decade?
But get ready, he's gonna annoy you, watch.
A little bit. I'll be as least annoying as
All
possible. Okay, so an HIB is a classification of a type of behavior. There is a legal definition that the state sets on what constitutes an incident of harassment, intimidation, or bullying. Basically, the short version of it is that the action needs to be based on a distinguishing characteristic of the student who is the offended student as opposed to the offender. That doesn't mean that there were only 2 incidents at Ann Mullen Middle School of disciplinary issues. But there were 2 reports that were filed under the classification of harassment, intimidation, or bullying. So what is done is that immediately gets referred to an investigator. Each school has one, the anti-bullying specialist for that building. They have 10 school days to complete an investigation. And then the report gets reported to the building administration, the superintendent, and then the Board of Education as a whole. So for it to be an affirmed HIB, as the acronym is, it has to have occurred and it has to be motivated by a distinguishing characteristic. Just because something is not labeled a HIB doesn't mean that there wasn't any discipline or that an infraction of the disciplinary code takes place. Parents are notified of both the alleged offending student and the alleged victim from the beginning that an investigation took place. And then once the result is done, they have a right to appeal before the Board of Education. And then we have to hear the appeal at the next meeting. If they're not happy with the board's decision, they have a right to appeal to the Commissioner of Education of the state of New Jersey. So it is a legal process set by state law in the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act. And it's one that we follow, and you will see it every month during the school year. We do affirm HIB investigations. The board gets reported and information about that, so they can do so. And then parents have a right to appeal, which occasionally happens, and we hear those appeals in executive session. Hope that answers your question.
Is it necessary to like provide specific evidence to the investigator to, because like you said, like they only have 10 days, and like that's a very short window.
School days, that's a sufficient time period because you have to balance both efficiency of the investigation and the ability to get something done.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is like, is there information that the agreed party should be like making sure, okay, I need to document this.
Sure. What they do is they give a statement. The alleged victim gives a statement. They name any other witnesses. The other witnesses get interviewed. Sometimes there's social media posts, TikTok, Snapchats, Facebook. Not many kids are on Facebook anymore, right? Yeah, there are whatever evidence that they have is collected, analyzed, and then the anti-bullying specialist makes the determination based on the evidence gathered during the report.
Was there any other questions?
Somebody way in the back.
There's someone over here.
Somebody way in the back.
Someone all the way in the back?
Miss Wilson.
Miss Wilson.
My request is just not to see if the policies were followed, but to make recommendations on what the policies need to be changed to prevent this from happening in the future. That would be great if we could get that as a public. And then also, can we find out aggregate data across the district as to how many times these kinds of incidents occur? But you can see locally, not in detail in individual incidents, but globally, how often this is occurring. Like that, real quick, and I'll sit down. Is the list of committee chairs going to be made public?
The list
Committees.
Does it need to be?
Yeah, it's public document.
It's public document, yes.
Yep. Is that going to be published soon or already been?
Here's what you picked the committees, correct?
Yes.
All right, Mrs. Grubb, Mr. Milson, can you give your email address to Mrs. Grubb? And it will be emailed to you tomorrow morning. Or you can post on the site, that's fine also.
Just keep your email.
Whatever you'd like to do, but if you want it directly emailed to you, you can give it to me.
Okay.
I understood.
But so we get minutes to those meetings,
So, so a report is something the board can consider. There aren't formal minutes taken at those, but there can be reports at a board meeting if that's the direction the board wants to go.
I'm requesting that the board report for each committee meeting.
Thanks for the request. All right.
Yeah, lady over here too.
To the right.
Okay, all the way over here? Yes.
My name is Michelle Manfred. I'm at 28 Annapolis Drive. I'm also a teacher at Ariel. February of last year, speaking of the discipline, we met with, the executive team met with Mr. Bildo, Mr. Trow about the discipline and our concerns with it. Since last year, the middle school teachers have met 2 times, elementary school teachers have met once. I'm wondering if there's gonna be any follow-up committee meetings, because for the discipline committee, because we absolutely very concerned.
Okay, when you say meetings, who are with teachers and?
Our executive team on the meeting that was the Bildo in February of last year.
Okay,
And expressed many concerns about discipline
okay,
in our school. And since that meeting, we've had 2 middle school meetings, and last year in May, we had 1 elementary meeting, and nothing since. With the exec, this is a district level discipline.
is this something we can look into?
Yeah, good evening, Michelle. On the heels of meeting with the executive committee, there was an additional meeting in the late spring. It was held at Charles Lewis School, with GTA members there, along with middle school administration, Mr. Joe and I. And then I guess within the last 10 days, we would rekindle that meeting and have another meeting regarding student discipline.
This is something that we feel as a board that we need to work on to make sure that it's across the board, that every middle school has the same policies of what's going on, what punishments, or not punishments, but consequences, thank you.
Right.
So middle school has a section, elementaries have a section. We need to make sure that that it's being followed, the policy that we do have. So, yeah, we are working on that.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of issues in the middle school, but
Yes.
it's starting in elementary school.
Yeah.
And that's probably kindergarten.
Yeah.
And it's just following, so we're very concerned. And we would like to follow up on some of those meetings and like we're asking, making policies and figuring out how to make it better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone?
The second row didn't have it on yet.
Yeah, you please.
Barbara 17, Spring Valley. I have a couple questions. In the November board meeting, Ms. O'Donnell and I believe it's Mr. Law.
Oh, correct.
Okay, the 2 of you were starting to set something up for the bus drivers. Since then, we've heard like this is very aggravating. I see it with this family. I see it with these teachers. You say, okay, yeah, we'll get that, we'll do this, we'll do that. Nobody ever gets any answers. So like, we haven't gotten an answer. How is your team coming with what needs to be changed? Like, are you still on the committee for the bus drivers? Like, there's new committees now, so we don't know if you're still on the committee.
I am on the committee. I am no longer the chair of the committee, Mr. Marks is, but I am still on the committee.
Okay.
Yes,
Who picks those committees?
Mrs.
board
Johnson.
president.
I do.
And then how do you pick them? Like,
I pick them where I think they're the strongest. So if some of our committees are not as active as others, and I tried when I sat down to do it, I tried to place the people that I know to have the best place for them to be. But I take it by their strengths. So
okay, so, okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Where is the thing with the transportation? being given the raise that was offered to them. My understanding is that Mr. Bilodeau had stated, he needed more time until the board got set, got placed, got seated. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the right language is, but, that happened. And like you had a meeting in the back, you know, your 6 o'clock meeting. Have you discussed what we've been talking about since June with the rate? I know you can't get into
Yeah.
detail, but we need some sort of an answer like.
Here's what I'm, because we kind of have our hands tied behind our back a little bit here.
Why?
Because it's personnel matters that we can't discuss publicly.
Okay, wait a minute.
In general.
You can explain that, like.
No, we can't. We really can't. When we're talking about things that are negotiations, we cannot discuss that publicly. We can tell you that we just,
I'm sorry.
we can, she just said you wish.
I wish, but I did, Mr. Bilodeau did reach out to me regarding a separate meeting that with different conversations than the one you initially talked about. The one you initially talked about was brought up publicly. Mr. Marks and I were gonna come together with the drivers and listen to your concerns, right? So that's one meeting we're talking about. That's the one where Mr. Long is working on. Well, he did his part in it.
Right.
So the second one, Mr. Bilodeau.
What's the next part?
So here's, yes, please.
Miss Sabatino, good evening. How are you? There's a few issues
Use the microphone.
relative to the. Oh. Can you hear me?
No, it's not turned on. No.
I'll just speak loud.
No, it's okay.
There's just, it will.
Yeah, I had it on.
Say nice things about me until it comes off. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So let me try to give an update, at least from what I know on this. There are a couple of issues. I think Mrs. O'Donnell was correct. In the October meeting, I believe there was a suggestion that certain board members wanted to talk directly to drivers to understand things in that department. Part and parcel to that was certain, I guess, rules of engagement, ground rules. That Mr. Long developed in writing. They came to me, they went to your new president. She has had the executive committee of your union review them and has told me they are acceptable. So in regard to the first set of meeting, I just.
That's the first I heard that.
Yes, well, that was very recent, Mrs. O'Donnell, very recent. But so to have that initial meeting, what was ever discussed, I did not make the October meeting. So whatever was discussed then, that pathway, I believe, now exists.
Perfect.
Albeit I would recommend to Mr. Long that you put some sunset date on those that they're not open-ended forever. Those guidelines.
Okay.
Set the date for you so it gets done.
I'm just letting you know that that particular set of ground rules for board members to talk to drivers, that exists. And yes, so if that wants to be something that Mr. Marks through the transportation committee wants to be the board reps to speak with your driver. I wasn't there, but yes, have at it. You can provide dates and I can give them to Mr. Marks. Is that fine with you, Mrs. Johnson? Okay.
John, what do you mean by a sunset date?
So it's let to go here.
Well, there's different sunset.
Sunset means like let them be existing until June 30th, 2023. So they're not there until 2029 is the point. It was just a suggestion.
No, I
Don't
just,
care.
because you know,
Yeah.
there's a couple different things.
Agreed. So that was item number one. Item number two, Mrs. O'Donnell was referring to is really collective bargaining, and it does really get into the whole quagmire of personnel issues. Now, there was a request from your union president that we rekindle those meetings. They were kind of put off for the holidays and for the board to reorganize. The board just reorganized. We now have committees. So the timing from Mrs. Rodriguez came to me. I went to Mrs. Johnson and said, hey, your personnel committee is different. Who is going to be doing this? She said, please contact Mrs. O'Donnell and she will facilitate this. So I do know that Mr. Marks and Mrs. O'Donnell, along with other administrators, are going to be part of the team to meet with Mrs. Rodriguez and her team on that second matter. That date is right we are in the middle of trying to come up with a date that everyone can meet.
Okay, so that meeting has to happen prior to our meeting.
Not necessarily. I think they're two separate tracks.
I wasn't at the October meeting. I don't know that. I don't think they're related to each other.
Okay, so that we are able to put something together in writing and give it to either one of the two, Mr. Marks and Mr. Donald, to get that meeting
Scheduled?
scheduled. Yeah, because like. it's-
Agreed.
Like, obviously, it's June, it still hasn't been
Sure.
discussed about a raise that was offered to us, which we should have gotten, but we hadn't for whatever reasons, it doesn't matter. The point is, we need to really get on the ball and start working this. We don't want to wait, we don't want to, we just want. I'm sorry?
They're talking.
Was someone behind me?
Well, hey, we just do one at a time, but we agree with you.
You know, so like.
I'm tired too. I agree.
Right.
And I'm going to get with the people that are here and get dates, and then I'll submit them. I already have a meeting room where we can go. We don't have to go anywhere in the school. We don't have to, get approval from the board. So the meeting place is set. We'll get a couple of dates. We'll give you like 3 or 4 dates.
Great.
In the evening.
We also need the parameters from Mr. Long.
No, we did. He just.
Okay, but
yeah.
you did that, but we
Yeah.
need to all go over them together,
Yes.
like, yeah.
I agree.
Everyone needs to be in agreement with the parameters that we have to stay within, that's all.
You need during that meeting, we'll do that.
Yes.
That's fine. We have no problem doing it.
Perfect,
We just need to get started getting something done.
agreed.
Need it soon.
I agree. Well, tonight's the first night I found out.
Yeah, Dan.
Great.
So this
30
is
minutes
the
is
way
up.
else
Okay.
we can work. It's from the bus drivers and the committee, the bus drivers committee. From the board, correct?
The transportation committee and drivers.
Okay, that's it. No union.
I'm not sure what was agreed upon between Mr. Long. I don't,
Not me.
yes.
Oh, the ground.
Yes, the ground.
You have the ground.
Oh.
It's the same exact ones that I sent you, that you were good.
How
with.
many people? Was that all agreed upon? How many people are going?
Yeah, all that.
Okay,
Yeah, we're good.
all right.
We got to get some stuff scheduled on 2 fronts.
Yes.
Better
Yes.
than later.
Oh, right.
Oh, I'm
All
sorry.
right. So it's 30 minutes. Do you want to extend?
Yes,
All right, so need a
I'll do that.
Okay,
I move to extend the public portion.
15 minutes.
second,
You don't have.
I'll second it.
Sheena, all in favor.
The public
Aye.
is okay with the meeting.
All right, we're
I'll
extending.
take it over the meeting.
This is-
It wasn't extended for you.
I see Mr. Crow's laid out plan here is teacher this, meeting this, weakness this, department meeting, math meeting. This is his beautiful presentation of it. When do we ever consider the child in this evaluation?
Whole time.
Because what's happening, I go to a science department meeting and read the scores for the kids that have already graduated 8th grade. They're the scores I'm reading. How am I gonna make that kid better? He's in high school. All right, so that is very frustrating as a teacher to go to that meeting. We are at the point where we're still in block scheduling, mind you. Block for 84 minutes. We have neighboring districts that deliver this test in the child's class. Like if you're in ELA, you take the ELA test. You're in science, you take the science test. You're in math. No, we have the gym teachers administering the English department test. So the kid can sit there with the gym teacher monitoring and go, beep, 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 submit. Do we ever weed out the kids who took the test in 13 seconds? Because they can.
I don't think it's.
They could take this test by going, open it up, submit it, close it, open it.
Contracts, man.
The clock is running on their computer and then they put their head down. Because in Gloucester Township, we put them in a huge lockdown while the entire state is taking the test. But in our neighboring district, they give this test in their, if you have 84 minutes.
Can we please one person at a time? Mr. Pildes is speaking. Thank you.
I'm saying a major variable in these results are A, the kids have no vested interest in passing this test. They could care less. You could be a beautiful writer, who just want to get done, so you put your head down and you have the first 3 hours of school to sleep. They do, they do.
Okay.
And yeah, it's a wow moment, but when you're administering it, I'm not allowed to help you. I'm not allowed to do it. My hands are tied. All I can do is say, did you hit submit? You know, did you check over your work? They didn't even read it. 5-paragraph essay, they're done in 3 seconds? No, they didn't read it. So where in that data are we excluding the kids who are, they're taking the test, but they themselves are opting out? And it's truly skewing all this data, red, white, and blue that you make it. That's number one. Number two, are we revisiting 6 days on, 6 days off? I am reteaching more than I'm teaching at this point. The kids are frustrated. I have lower passing kids than ever before because they just don't get it. They're in social studies, it's Civil War, and next minute they're talking about photosynthesis. Like it's like, and then they're like, oh, I forgot about that. You know, and like getting them back into my subject is very hard. Are we revisiting for the sake of the child? Are we revisiting 6 days on, 6 days off, or are we gonna find out on September 1?
We need to look into that. We will look into
That's
that.
what it said, we're gonna re-look into.
Yeah.
We will.
Will the kids this year know what their science and social studies schedule will be before they even do?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
They didn't this year.
They need to.
they will.
They came in September 1 and it was like new shocker to us and new shocker to them.
That's 3 minutes, just, you know.
They will fight.
We're working on it.
Working on it.
We're working on
I
it.
appreciate it.
We're working on it.
Yes, Patty.
It's painful.
Happy Pride, PTA. So I want to address district policy 5511, dress and grooming. I believe there needs to be consistency across the district, and I believe the board has worked hard and diligently on forming these policies, which was formed in March 2009. And it doesn't seem to be being followed since September. And all I'm hearing is, oh, it's at the discretion of administration. That's not, I don't see that in the policies. In fact, the policy says here, we feel that our expectations are consistent with the needs of school pupils, as well as our commitment to maintain a safe and orderly school environment. What we are doing by not following this policy is we are destroying the foundation of these students. And sooner or later, if we don't have a good foundation, okay, that whole student is going to crumble, or there's going to be a nice big explosion. I will suggest, Ms. Johnson, that we take the time as the board and go back and revisit this policy, or make sure this policy is being followed by administration within the district.
Yeah, every single one.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Actually, that policy would be, committee is going to be reviewing it, policy committee. Actually, what I have done is I've gone on, I know we're discussing the ripped jeans. I have gone on my computer and I've pulled up a lot of pictures of different types of ripped jeans that I want the committee to take a look at to see. Obviously, there are some that you wouldn't allow your daughter to go out of the house with. And then maybe there are the other ones maybe that, well, all right, that we'll let that one slide. So what we need to do, what I'd like them to do is to take each picture and decide is this okay or is this not okay?
My concern is they're not following the policy that's being.
Right, and the policy will be, we will be looking at the policy also.
So I also pulled, if you go and just look at surrounding districts policy. 4 out of the 5 districts that I looked at around surrounding areas all address ripped and torn jeans, which then turn into crop tops.
Yes.
Which then turn into other
Yes.
areas that should not be seen during the
Yes.
school day, because it causes a distraction,
Mhm.
causes people to go a little unstable in the school day.
Yes, yes,
It's the hoods, it's the hats, it's the sunglasses, it's the headbands, bandanas, earpods, the whole 9 yards. I mean, it's turned, I'll go in here, this is probably 5,600, which is, pupil discipline and code of conduct. Maybe that one also needs to be revisited as well.
thank you,
Appreciate that.
thank you.
Let me get a gentleman in the back who hasn't spoken yet.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Ed Shaw, Ariel, New Jersey. I'm there with the bus drivers, and I know there's a lot of red tape and this and that, but please listen to us. We're about ready to lose about 5 or 6 more drivers. The other townships that would pay more. And tomorrow, we're gonna be what? No, not everyone. Myself, and I don't work with that. It's a great job. Like the people I work with, but I'm telling you, there's about at least 6, 7 people, am I right, John? We're going to be losing. We can't afford it.
No, we can't.
Can't.
Please, please do something.
We hear you. We hear you.
We cannot afford to lose that more drivers.
No, we can't.
And the surrounding towns, boy, they're paying more, giving the same benefits. And our hands are really.
We do hear you.
We need an emergency, like, let's schedule this like ASAP.
Yeah.
If there's any red tape that can be pushed aside, please do.
Okay.
Please.
All right, we're working on it.
You heard that?
We're working on it, I promise.
I have a question though, if you're working on it, right, the board meets 1 time a month.
As a full board. As needed. So if you schedule that meeting, it could take place whenever the committee's available.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be just at.
At this
meeting.
Right. And I think talking to the new transportation chair and the old transportation chair, you both wanted to see possible.
I need to relook over what Mr. Long sent.
I do too.
Yeah, we need to relook, because it was a while ago that I looked at it, so we need to look at it. Check the parameters of who can do what, and Mr.
Yeah.
Marks, can you he'll reach out.
We would like it scheduled as soon as possible.
We would like it scheduled as soon as possible.
I have a question while we're.
Yes.
30 minutes is up.
Janet Monitor, Aaron.
Oh, it's 5.
I have been wondering the same thing that this brought up about dress code. Okay, I know back in the day, my niece got sent home or got whatever because her tank top and straps were a little too thin. Okay, I, as a bus driver, cannot believe what I'm seeing. Okay, you've got in middle school, we have busty girls in middle school. Their cleavage is hanging out this much as they bounce down the road. Like, come on now, okay? They're crop tops. Highland High School, which is not, this, but it's how our kids go there. They're up there. That is all open. Like, where is the supervision and where's the, get down to the office, cover that up. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I was going to invent something a while back, okay? Modesty, whatever, and if you get called down, you get to put one of these on and walk around for the day. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta embarrass these kids or something, they can't be leaving happy. And I know some of the girls, because we could come in and use the restroom on our, like in between the run, they be in there changing. Their mom and dad don't know what they're leaving in. I mean, they know what they're leaving in. They don't know what they're changing into once they get there. So that needs to be brought up because as a grandmother, I see these girls and I'm thinking, no way.
Yes.
No way. I have a grandson that comes to this school. And when I saw this girl's cleavage hanging out this much, and I'm like, seriously?
Yeah.
You know?
It's
We need
not.
to do something about this. And
Exactly.
same with the buses. And we have such problems on the buses. It's not just, it's the buses, you know, and there's fights, nothing gets done. There's fights, oh, well, we'll put them on a different bus, or, okay, we'll write them up. How many times have you written the same person up?
Okay, well, thank you.
When we used to do is, when we would write our write-up, it's a triplicate. So the school gets the one, the driver gets one, and then the office has one. But we're supposed to get something back to us, letting us know down the bottom how it was handled. We used to get that years ago. You know, Johnny got a suspension, or Johnny got a detention, or whatever. We haven't gotten them, and I don't even know when.
Maybe
So
that's-
no, we just, and like our days not long enough and hard enough, running, and then we gotta come back and write up 15 kids because they were bad. For that.
Maybe that's something we discuss when we have the sit down together of different ideas and some suggestions from the past that would like to be implemented moving forward.
We need to know how they're being handled, you know what I mean? It's children not.
Okay.
Not yet. Not yet.
All right, at this time, we need to move on, please, to board member comments. Anyone on the board?
I have a
member?
few things.
Yes, please.
I had to beat John. First thing that I have, it's a question for Mr. Bilodeau. Do we have any kind of status on the gas locks updates that we were discussing?
I believe that, some communication had gone to the board. I don't know.
I thought we got something with a price and everybody said to do it. I was just wondering if our gas has been locked up yet, or if everybody's just free for alling it.
I'm gonna have to, I think when it came out of the business office, I'm gonna have to research that.
Okay.
and See, but I thought it went to the board. I don't know that there was I don't know the response. I was under the impression there wasn't much of a response
Okay. Okay.
from the board.
Okay. I know I've asked about this before, but I was thinking about it again recently. I haven't been aware of it. If we have done it, has there been any representatives from our district that have gotten with regional district to try to get our calendars on the same? Because I know there's a lot of parents that have maybe high school kids that maybe watch some of their younger brothers and sisters or planning vacations or whatever. I know you said that there was a vacation or something for regional that they didn't want to give up, but is there any kind of talks that we can have to try to meet somewhere to get the schedule?
You can always have a meeting with Black Horse Pike Regional School District. And they have good administrators at that district. When it comes to the calendar, this topic's been spoken of for the last 19 years I've been here. That week-long break at spring, they have and we don't. And that is the primary problem. Either we're gonna have to extend our year or they're gonna have to shorten theirs. Or come to some happy medium. But that is the primary reason that they seem to be always 2 or 3 days behind us. And there are a lot of conforming dates, but it's not exacting. It's not an exact match because of that one issue.
Okay. I agree, and I thank a lot of the parents and staff that have come out. I always say that there's a lot of things that we don't know unless you guys come out. And I'm pretty annoyed at the fact that tonight's the first that I heard about this big fight at Mullins School. I can't even tell you what I would have done if that happened to my daughter and my daughter was in this school. I just think as board members, we need to be more informed. And I definitely think somebody over here had mentioned about the meetings, that there hasn't been a meeting in like a year. If we want things to change in this district, we have to be proactive and not reactive. I mean, I don't want our district to turn into a district that we see on the news where a lot of like bad things are happening. Those things start at little problems and blow up into bigger problems. So I think that we need to be a lot more proactive on things in our district. That's all I have.
Anyone else?
I do, please. Well, I wanted to, thank everybody for coming. I also wanted to let you know, I, attended the Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service at, Lewis School, and it was nice to see a lot of children from each school be honored, for service that they give back to the community. I did want to follow up on, I guess, one of my pet peeves, my HVAC person that we pay through the bill list every month instead of having one on staff. And I know that I've talked to Mr. Bilodeau in the past, and we agreed to post a higher salary. So I went on the website where the posting is, and there's no salary. So I'm not sure how anybody looking at the posting would know that we upped the salary. So I was just wondering if we could follow up on that, or just tell me that we're not going to pay that salary. And then I'll stop. But then I also did want to just follow up as chair of policy last year and a member of the policy committee this year. I just want to tell everybody that's spoken, clearly our policies are not being honored at this point in time. And for that, I do apologize. I have been chirping for many months behind the scenes, particularly about the dress code, and don't intend to let it go. But from my perspective, one of the biggest jobs the board has is to establish and approve policies. So I feel there are policies until we change them. So they're not changed. So these changes that you're telling everybody's complaining about and saying that are happening are very disturbing to me at this point in time. So you have my word. I will follow up on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes,
Gwen,
Go ahead,
please.
go ahead, Jen.
Thank you. Mr. Bilodeau, we do the violence reports, and I heard when I kind of mumbled it over here, Mr. Long did say they are twice a year. I cannot recall when the last one was. Do you have any idea? How recent?
I don't have the idea.
Can I get a date on that? And because I'd really like to see that. Can you
Mrs.
also?
O'Donnell, I thought
Yes.
I'm not certain, I thought they had changed the reporting standard on that violence and vandalism report. But I will, again, double check that.
I'd love to see some numbers.
I kind of understand where you're going.
Yeah. Just so I don't have to look because I'm lazy, can you send me the policy on violence? Maybe every one of the board members would like a little refresh on that policy. I remember voting on it. I'm not going to the website.
On violence?
Yeah, the violence policy, the consequences that we
Okay.
all voted yes on when kids get into fights and what happens to them, and you know, the consequences. I remember voting on that not long ago.
Yeah, 5,600.
I think it's actually regular.
What is it?
5,600.
5600, thank you.
Yeah.
And I also am quite disturbed that, but we going through those policies, it is this thick sometimes, pages upon pages. And I've always complained that we get them on, you know, Thursday and have to vote on them on Monday, and you can't even get through them. So we spent a lot of time on them, and for them to not be followed is, it's
Disturbing.
it stinks. So Ashley, I appreciate you coming out and telling us what's going on, because without you coming out, obviously we wouldn't have known. And that again is also, I hear you. I'm really interested in the report that Mr. Bilodeau is going to get to probably all of us regarding violence in the schools. No, we're updated supposedly twice a year. Mr. Bilodeau thought it changed, but I don't remember when the last one was, but I would love to get that report quickly, please.
Anyone else?
I hear you. That's all for me, Mrs. Johnson.
Thank you. Mrs. Gilch?
Yes, I would just like to say that I went to the MLK. It was a very nice program. The students that were honored, the amount of community people that came out, the parents and the children that were in the cafeteria doing different projects. It was really nice to see. The National Junior Honor Society, we went to Glen Landing, a few of us, and there's 2 more coming up. It's always a nice thing to see what our students are doing. I think along with this board are very concerned about the discipline and the dress code. I can tell you that I am working, I want to work on it, and I know the rest of the board wants to work on it. If we have to set a precedence in this district for districts that are in other areas, I'm all for it. We can't, and every school has to follow the same thing. We can't have one school, something happen in one school and it happened in another school and that child, the consequences are totally different. Everything has to be followed and it has to be followed by the policy, and we can't have holes in these policies. So I believe this board is really working on that. I truly do. And it's something that has to be done. And if we have to set a precedence to other communities, other schools, then so be it. Let Gloucester Township be that person.
Anyone else?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we
I'm
close.
sorry.
Would you mind coming up after the meeting, because we gotta keep rolling on our board member comments and then I gotta go to another. We'll come up, we'll bring you up after.
Okay.
3 days suspension, police were called in there before hearing.
When is that?
We can't comment on that, man. We can't, we're by law not permitted. We would be violating all the students' rights.
Okay. At this time, unfortunately, our executive session, we ran out of time. So at this point, the board will go back into executive session for one personnel item, and action will not be taken. When we're finished, we'll come back out and just adjourn the meeting. So you're welcome to stay if you want, but it's just pretty much, we'll just come out and adjourn and then go home.
Motion, yeah. Motion answered.
Can I have a motion to enter executive
So
session?
Second.
Oh, you need to do a roll call.
No, all in favor.
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Yeah, I'm gonna go home.